Hello and welcome to Ignite Your Phoenix Soul. I'm Anne Klint, and we are so glad that you're with us for deep healing and self-reclamation on your journey to living your soul's purpose. I'm so excited to be here today with my new friend and colleague, Irene Chong. Irene is a coach, a creative, and a healer. She teaches women like us how to tap into and access our innate intuition and wisdom, that beautiful inner wellspring from which beauty and ease naturally flow. I can't wait to get a little more beauty and ease into my life with you today, Irene. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Anna. It's an honor to be here.
And I told you before camera, but I just love the background. I love everything where you're sitting. It's so amazing. So happy to have you
Well,
here.
coming from a former artist, that's really a compliment.
Yes, it's just gorgeous to look at. I'm so blessed. So, the topic today is really near and dear to my heart and my soul and my adrenals because we're really talking about how do we stay resourced when we're on our soul path. And it is something, it is a dance that I don't always get right. I'll be totally transparent. And here I am in my sixth summit, and um, part of me is going, go back to bed, go back to bed, don't do this, it's too much. So let's just dive into that. Like when it comes to igniting your Phoenix soul and really living your purpose, what do we women really need to pay attention to from your perspective?
Yeah, so first off, thank you despite your tiredness, for organizing and putting all this gorgeous summit together. I love the theme. When I read it, I was just thinking, that it's really about igniting that inner flame that is eternal inside all of us, and the image of the phoenix, right? The idea that our soul can never be truly destroyed. But
Yeah.
as you were sharing, I was also thinking that the interesting thing about fire is that whilst there is a vibrancy and an aliveness about it, we talk about having a spark, having that fire and drive to pursue our passion. At the same time, fire can also burn and destroy. So
Yes.
if it goes out of control, it's dangerous. I think of the myth of Prometheus, where fire was a secret of the gods that he gifted humanity with. So it's a power. But I
Mhm.
feel that, as women, especially as women who are living our purpose, a key thing that we really need to pay attention to if you are someone who's boldly living and reclaiming your sovereignty is to ensure that you don't get burned out. And
Mhm.
I've honestly lost count of the number of women that I've spoken to, myself included, that became drained and exhausted. So even though we are doing what we love, actually, even or especially when we're doing deep, meaningful work, the temptation and the tendency is to overgive. So when I was looking at your theme, I felt that the key ignition switch that's needed is really to resource yourself, to
Yeah.
fill your cup so you don't run on empty. And it's something that really bears constant reminder and reinforcement. Even as we're serving women, we have to remember to fill our own cups as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, kind of there's a subtext to that, which is around really paying attention to overgiving and the idea, like a lot of us are programmed with codependent tendencies, from childhood, from our family of origin. And so really tuning in to what does an aligned form of service look like for us? What is, how do we do that? So I love, that you're bringing this forward. And how do you work with this personally? You say that you have your own history with burning out, and what are some of the things that actually work for you so that you don't burn out, or how
Hmm.
do you recover if you get too close to that fire?
Sure. So the first thing I'll say is it's not in my title, but I found that the key was really tapping into my innate womb wisdom. So I'll share my personal story in reclaiming this. And in sharing my story, I'm going to bring in astrology because I'm also an astrologer. I want to share that, understanding your soul imprint and the cosmic energies, like that was ultimately what led me to womb work. So one thing I will say is that in my chart, I have lots of fire. So
Mm.
it is one of the core elements because I have a stellium in a fiery sign. And that gave me permission. Like it was a relief for me to know that, oh, this is why I work this way. I have lots of fire and passion and drive, and then I burn out. So it
Mhm.
was a pattern of crash and burn in my life since I was young, since I was in school. And it wasn't until I rediscovered the innate feminine wisdom in my womb. How I came to it was also because of astrology, because another aspect in my chart is that I was born on a full moon.
Oh,
And that got me to see that it's important for me to explore all things related to the moon. So I
wow.
started out by charting my menstrual cycle. And I think as you know, menstruation is derived from the Greek and Latin words for month. And the ancients, they could tell. They knew that the menstrual cycle is related to the moon's cycle. So because of all this, it was sort of like a roundabout way of coming back to realizing that this aspect of my femininity is so important. And it was something that I hadn't been entirely conscious of.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering whether at this point I should say a little bit more about how I work with the womb. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, definitely. But I also just want to tell everyone who's tuning in that we're filming this on the super blue full moon. It happened last night here where I am in the US, and it's in the morning, quite earlier than I usually get up. In case I look extra tired, that's why. But where Irene is, which is across the globe in Thailand, it's the super blue full moon is today, and you're a full moon baby. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. But yeah, I would love to know more about the womb work. Tell us.
Yeah, and also just to add on to what you said, because I feel that when it comes to resourcing ourselves, it's about working with the energetics of what we have. It could be the moon cycle that is external, but also it affects us on an internal level. And we also have our own unique energy and rhythm. So let me say a little bit about the womb. I feel it's so vital because it was a total game changer. Number one, because I feel that most women are stuck in and we operate from our heads most of the time.
Mhm. Totally.
Either that, yeah, either that or we operate from our hearts, right? But below the head or below the waist, it tends to be neglected.
Mhm.
There's a whole toxic patriarchal history around this that I won't delve into, but suffice to say that it's also an aspect of ourselves that can be hard to access. I mean, not only is the womb like a deep cavernous chamber that we don't see compared to, say, the male sexual organ, but there's also a lot of taboo, a lot of distortion around our sexuality, female
Totally.
sexuality for one.
Yep.
So this is an aspect I find is not readily accessible for women, be it in schools, be it in families that we grew up in. So just to say that at the beginning, it took me a really long time to arrive at this. It was only in, I would say, my late 20s and early 30s. And once I discovered it, I just thought, wow, I wish I could have grown up knowing about this.
Same.
So a
Totally.
couple of yeah, so a couple of key things about the womb. When I'm talking about the womb, it is both a physical organ as well as a metaphysical space. So
Mhm.
there is a somatic biological component as well as an energetic component. Now, so long as you're a woman, you are a womb carrier. A man who has a womb, woman, womb, man.
Yeah.
So, and I'm really referring to the entire system. There are specific parts, right? Like the cervix, the labia, the vulva, etc. We can go deep into the physicality, but for the purposes of our call together, I'm going to keep it general and distill down to the core essence of womb work. So regardless of whether you have a womb or not, due to surgery, or regardless of whether you are still in your menstruating years, the womb teaching that I'm going to share here will still be relevant. So I was thinking a lot about the womb this morning, and the analogy that I feel suits us best in this context, with the theme of fire, is to see the womb as a cauldron, and that
Mm.
was actually how the ancient Taoists referred to this region, the sacral chakra. But really, the idea of the womb as a vessel and a
Yeah.
sacred chalice.
Mhm.
right? It is nurturing, nourishing. At the same time, it is also a protective barrier. So if, early on you talked about codependency, and I was also sharing about overgiving, a core lesson that I feel women especially need to learn is healthy boundaries. So how to
Mhm.
protect ourselves, how to keep what is, for us, and to contain ourselves away from the external noise and distraction. So that's what I want to talk about. There are three key points about the womb that I feel are important. Number one, it is cyclical and there are changes. Earlier on, you brought up the idea of this being a full moon. It's possible to chart your menstrual cycle if you're menstruating together with the moon cycle. So the dark moon phase, that would be when you are having your flow. And then when you're ovulating, that would be the time of the full moon. So there is a cycle and there are changes. All this to say that the womb is not a static organ. It is dynamic, right? It grows, it shrinks. Even, for example, the cervix,
Mhm.
there are moments when it shifts in position. It's also possible for your physical womb, if you have one, to be distended or to be for it to move around. So that's just something to note, that it undergoes changes.
Yeah.
Most dramatically, of course, when you undergo pregnancy. Why this is important is because if you think about the cycle, for example, as you go about your life, say you are working on a project, like this summit, for example, there is a gestation period, conception, gestation, and then the birth, and then the labor. So there are these seasonal and cyclical changes that we all go through. I feel that this is an important point that I want to emphasize because, again, in this, patriarchal, very over masculine world that we live in, there is a lot of, go, go, go attitude. You never stop, you never rest. It's about hustling and pushing, and it's very linear. Whereas when you start working with your womb, you're going to notice that your energy levels, your physical body, it changes according to the cycle that you are undergoing.
Yeah.
So a huge part of resourcing yourself when it comes to these womb teachings is knowing that you have your own unique cycle. Your
Mhm.
cycle could be very different from your mother, your sister, your friends. Of course, if you're in community and in deep community with a group of women, there is a tendency for your cycles to sync as well. So this is scientifically proven, right? It is a fact. But also just to say, right, that these changes and fluctuations are something that we need to pay attention to and that we need to honor.
Yeah, absolutely. I call that our energy blueprint also, that we all have this our own wiring and it shifts and change. It's seasonal as well, and it changes with our age and our experiences, that life brings our way, and that deeply honoring that cycle is so very important to really being able to maximize our well-being, maximize our potential, and maximize what it is that we actually have to offer. We can't work if we work against that cycle, we get burned out like 100% of the time. 100%. So
Yeah.
I love that you're tying this in metaphysically and biologically, physically to the body. um so, with all of that said, so that's the backstory. Like, how do we, using that information and that knowledge, how do we actually resource ourselves? Like, can you give us a tangible example? And I know I'm just going to plant a seed, like your free gift is actually all about this. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But just, for right now in our conversation, how do we do it? What does it look like?
Mm. Yeah, beautifully said. I just want to come back to the earlier point you said about honoring our energetic blueprint, because astrologically, I was talking about the moon cycle. Astrologically, like knowing your unique signature soul blueprint can also be very helpful. And then when you combine the two, so for example, with the clients that I work with, as an example of a tangible support that women can have, looking at their in their chart, the position of the moon, the sign of the moon, and then if they are menstruating, how they can work with that, how it can complement each other,
Mhm.
so that you can track your own unique rhythm. So that's one way. And earlier on, I pointed out there were three things that I wanted to share about the womb teachings. So in resourcing yourself, number one, knowing that you have your own unique cycle and that you can work with that instead of go against that. So instead of pushing and struggling, you can resource yourself by flowing with your cycle. So that's one way of doing it. The other thing about womb work that I feel is especially pertinent would be around the idea of creation. So obviously, biologically, the purpose of having a womb is to create life, is to produce, to give birth to something. And that can be seen on both on the physical as well as the metaphysical level. So when it comes to resourcing ourselves, number one, even before I talk about giving birth, right, the act of sexual intimacy is meant to be pleasurable. Again, because of the distortions and the acts of violence that has plagued women for centuries, for thousands of years, there's a lot of trauma and wounding in that as well, which needs to be unpacked. So all the layers, earlier on I was talking about how it's hard for some women to access our womb space because of the trauma that's stored there. It could be in this lifetime. It could also be ancestral and generational.
Right.
So just to say that, when I talk about womb work, it can go really, really deep, especially because it can be difficult to access. So go slow, take your time, get the right support for you. Once you do that, and you're able to open up to the vibrancy, to the pleasure that your womb can give you. And let me just say that earlier I didn't mention the clitoris, but just to say, right, it's the only part of the human body that was specifically designed solely for pleasure. Mm-hmm. So coming and getting to know your womb space, all parts of it, and knowing how it functions and what you can do to nourish yourself. So pleasure in that way. And then moving on to creation, where creation is also meant to be a pleasurable, alive, vibrant way of living. Once you reach the stage of self-actualization, you want to create, you want to express yourself, you want to bloom and to flower and to flourish. So when it comes to creation, if I think about, say, a woman in her first trimester, and again, you have these the physical representation of it, and then you can see it as a metaphor as well. So there are these stages to a woman's pregnancy in which there are different things you can do to nourish and take care of yourself. Very interestingly, in society, when a woman becomes pregnant, I don't know whether it's true for you, but I found that in the women, in my friends, in my family, when a woman becomes pregnant, something shifts in the way she protects and holds herself. Yeah. She no longer tolerates certain things because guess what? She's no longer just looking out for herself. She is tending to a precious life.
Yeah.
So when it comes to boundary work, womb work can also be very important. Resourcing ourselves means we don't give our power away. It means that we know how to fill our own cups, take in nourishment that we need in order to create and bring forth what it is that we want. For women who, say, in career or business, so they're not physically in labor, metaphorically, they can look at the womb and learn from the lessons in how a woman looks after herself during pregnancy, during labor, and also postnatal, right? There is a rest and recovery period that is needed that is often still in society taken for granted. Absolutely. After a woman spends 9 months in pregnancy, she only has about 2-3 months of rest, and then she's expected to go right back to work as well as look after her baby.
In the US, it's 6 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine?
Yeah. So when you think
it's
about
crazy.
It just really doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give an example.
You're touching on something else that I want to insert here too, which is that from the metaphysical perspective, when we women, especially when we're in business, let's say, when we bring a project to fruition or culmination, we're very inclined with this patriarchal and kind of mindset of achievement and everything growing and expanding and getting bigger and bigger, is that one of the things that we don't do is we don't celebrate our wins. And so similarly, like we'll have the baby, we'll create the project, we'll do the thing like the summit, and then it's on to the next idea. It's on to the next thing. Like, okay, well, how can I serve next? How can I create next? As opposed to actually, and that comes back to the harvest of just actually honoring and saying, holy cow, look at this baby I just created. And I just really want to name that this is so important for us to celebrate. And it's one of the things that we so easily overlook in our culture. Do you agree from your perspective, what you see women doing?
Absolutely. And also, yeah. And also to add on to that, after a woman gives birth, a lot of attention is given to the baby.
Yeah.
The mother is not always supported and given sufficient attention. So, for example, you talked about, oh, after 6 weeks, the mom is meant to just go back to work, everything is okay. And yet it is expected that she balance both her career as well as looking after
Right.
her baby, her new identity as a mother. So when we talk about celebration, sometimes, and I wanted to touch on the idea of burnout and the postnatal drop, because hormonally there are changes
Yeah.
that a woman experiences energetically as well. After you birth a project, with the dopamine and the oxytocin that comes, there will then be, after the spike, there's a drop. How do you manage your energy? There can be a period of depression because
Yeah.
you start to feel low and you start to crash. And this is when you really need to look at not just rest and recovery. Maybe maybe you're not quite ready to celebrate just yet, because what comes before the celebration is the honoring of the rest and recovery.
Yeah.
And when you are then rested and fully recovered, then yes, by all means, go ahead and celebrate and ensure that you get to fully honor and say yay and yes to the wonderful life that you have just given.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So you've just given me my prescription for what to do after the summit is over, after our live salon and all of that. I absolutely love it. I love it. Can you give us a teaser of what your beautiful free gift is, this resourcing your womb activation?
Yeah, but is it okay if I just quickly
Oh
add
yeah.
in that piece of, because you were talking about the after party celebration. I just want to add in one important point, and again, I'll use the analogy of a physical pregnancy. um, if you think about conscious labor phases, you would have, say, a midwife or a doula to help
Yeah.
you. So the idea of making sure you have support, and I know that you have a coach, so ensuring that you have support and
Yeah.
someone to keep you accountable to ensure that you do look after yourself, that you don't give all your attention to, say, your clients or your baby, that you make sure
That's
you look
right.
after yourself. I think that
Absolutely.
piece is so very important. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I wanted to highlight that because, again, there's a tendency for women to be overly self-reliant, to think that they can do it on their own. But just as you wouldn't expect a woman to give birth on her own, it's a painful, stressful experience, right? No way around it.
Right.
You would imagine that support is so essential. And that's why, when I think about resourcing yourself, coming into community with a group of women who are um, attuned to and connected to the intelligence in their wombs is important as well. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to say that.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. The power of sisterhood and the power of mentorship is just really, really, really cannot be overstated how important it is to have that kind of sisterhood and mentorship in your life. And I really love that you're bringing that up. And of course, in the divine feminine paradigm that we are co-creating right now, these are non-negotiable elements, like living our purpose, feeling alive and lit up, feeling that we are contributing in the way that our soul is called towards. It cannot happen on our own. It has to happen in this nurturing kind of community that we're talking about. So thank you so much for bringing that up. It's really, really critical, Irene. I really appreciate that you highlighted that.
Yeah, and as we draw to a close, I also want to point out one very important and crucial element when it comes to womb work. And that is, so far we've talked about the ideal scenario, the full period of gestation, conception, gestation, pregnancy, and then labor. What happens when it doesn't come into full fruition? Because there will be moments, right, when we all experience disappointments, failures. And I really want to bring this back to the idea of the phoenix, the
Mm,
resurrection of the phoenix, because just as the womb is about creation, it is also about death.
yeah,
Um, for example, right, miscarriages, abortions, the violence, or even if I just look at the menstrual cycle,
right.
there is a period of shedding, of release, and of dying. There is a clear phoenix energy to the way the womb works. So I just want to highlight that as well, and saying that it's crucial to honor that, again, because I feel that there is so much that is performative, so much that is expected of women to always put on a happy,
Hmm.
celebratory front, right?
Hmm.
It is also important because your theme highlighted the importance of embracing all parts of us,
Right.
the shadowy aspects, the parts that are dying, that are shedding and are ready to be released. There is also a crucial need to honor that.
Mm.
So right now, I've just given I think I managed to cover all the three main points I wanted to say about the womb. You're I feel like I've only just skimmed the surface here, but I also know
Totally.
that our time is short. Hopefully, your audience will get the core fundamentals of how they can resource themselves by delving deeper into their innate womb intelligence.
Yes, thank you so much. We did really cover a lot, and I know that we could go much deeper with this. And I do want to have you on my YouTube channel, and we'll get to do this. We'll take a much longer time with it, and take a deeper dive. I just it's so great. You have so much wisdom to share. You're so really good at stringing all of the ideas together, and I just really appreciate that, Irene. And I do want to take this much deeper with you. Um, Tell us how your activation can serve us right now, today, to get resourced.
Okay, great. Yeah, so earlier you mentioned that at the time of this interview recording, it's the full moon. But by the time your audience watches this, it will be around the time of the new moon.
Yes.
And it's the new moon in Virgo. So I thought you chose that time well, because it's Virgo, it's the archetype of the Virgin. And this connects really well to the womb teachings here, because the original meaning of this word is not a reference to a woman who has never had sexual intimacy. And it really refers to a woman who is whole unto herself.
Uh,
And the root word of virgin, right? It's derived from Latin. It carries connotations of strength and independence. So, the problematic narratives about a woman's sexuality has affected also our relationship with our wombs. So
yes.
this free gift, a 10-minute activation, I deliberately kept it short, simple, and sweet, just to say that you can use this at any time of the month. The new moon or the full moon, these are great times if you want to schedule it in to plan to use it as an activation. The new moon, you would use it as a seed planting moment, or during the full moon, it'll be a time of ripening where you are reaping the harvest. Earlier on, I mentioned that the womb is not a static organ,
Right.
which means that depending on the time and season that you tune into this activation, depending on your own energetic rhythms and your bodily cycle, your body will, or your womb will give you different messages. So what I want to say is that I would encourage your audience, if they sign up for the free gift, to listen to this not just once. It is
Right.
one of those practices that I would say helps, if you do it several times, to develop and cultivate that relationship with, honestly, one of the most intimate parts of who you are. So this is I called it resourcing your womb. It's about you giving to your womb. There's a womb heart connection that I share, and then it's also about filling your heart from your womb space. So there's this reciprocity of giving, of flowing, and of nourishing. Yeah.
I love it. And I'm so grateful. It feels like exactly what I need. And I'm so grateful that we could do this pre-recorded segment because it's so important and it fits so well with the theme. And unfortunately, our time differences are such that we couldn't get you on live, but I just really appreciate that you're participating with us in this way. This has been wonderful, Irene. And like I said, we're just scratching the surface. So let's definitely, you and I, make a date to go deeper with this at another time and do a deeper exploration. I've so appreciated having your energy and wisdom and guidance as part of Ignite Your Phoenix Soul. Thank you so, so much.
Well, thank you so much, dear Anna. As you know, I love and honor the work that you're doing. And I'm so privileged. I feel so privileged and honored to be able to be a part of this. Though I can't show up live, I think it's amazing and wonderful that we can still connect across the globe and do this recording.